Human treated an alien girl without titles, and she realized it was the freedom she'd long missed. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. Zara Valen stood in the grand hall of the Crimson Palace, the towering structure that had been her home for as long as she could remember. The lavishness of her surroundings felt normal to her, as if it was a part of her identity. Her bright red skin shimmered under the warm light of the chandeliers, and her silvery hair cascaded down her back like the finest silk. Every step she took echoed in the marble hall, her every movement a testament to her position as a member of the ruling class of the Tan Dominion. Her life had always been one of privilege, but also one of expectation. As the daughter of Queen Nisha, she had been raised to carry herself with grace, dignity, and an ever-present awareness of her title. There was no room for anything less than perfection. Yet, in the quiet moments when the palace was still, Zara often wondered if she was more than just her title. Was there more to her than the responsibilities she had been born into? Could she, just for once, experience life without the weight of expectations? That thought had always felt like a distant dream, something that could never be hers. But then, everything changed when she met Ethan Carter. Ethan was not like the others who surrounded her. He was just a human, a bodyguard assigned to protect her and the royal family during diplomatic missions on Earth. His role was clear, his duties set in stone. But there was something different about him. Zara couldn't put her finger on it at first. He was respectful, of course, but it wasn't the kind of respectful that came from fear or admiration. It was the kind of respect that came from seeing her as a person, not just a title. Ethan never bowed to her or called her by her formal titles. Instead, he treated her as if she were just another human being. And that, for the first time in her life, made Zara feel like she was seen for who she truly was. The first time they spoke, it was after a long day of meetings and events. Zara had been exhausted, both physically and mentally, and was about to retire to her chambers when Ethan had caught her in the hallway. "You look tired," he said, his voice calm and genuine. "Maybe you should rest before tomorrow's schedule." It was such a simple statement, but it struck Zara in a way that no one else's words ever had. No one had ever asked her to rest, to take care of herself, as though her well-being mattered. It was always about appearances, about duty, about being perfect. "Thank you," she had replied, almost surprised. He hadn't asked for anything in return, nor had he expected her to act any differently. For a moment, Zara wondered why his kindness felt so different from the politeness of everyone else. But she pushed the thought away, not sure if she was ready to confront it. Over the next few days, their interactions continued to be brief, but each one left a lasting impression on Zara. Ethan never treated her as royalty. He treated her as a person. There were no formalities, no expectations. He simply listened when she spoke and offered his thoughts when asked. It wasn't until they were alone one evening, walking through the palace gardens after a long day, that Zara realized just how much she had come to appreciate his presence. The moonlight bathed the garden in a soft glow, casting long shadows on the ground. Zara walked beside Ethan, the air cool against her skin. "You know," she said, her voice quiet, "I've never had a conversation like this before. Not with anyone who doesn't expect something from me." Ethan looked at her, his expression kind but curious. "What do you mean?" "People always want something," she replied. "They want me to be a queen, a ruler, a symbol. But you don't want anything from me." Ethan smiled, though there was a trace of sadness in his eyes. "I don't need anything from you, Zara. I just want you to be you." It was those words that stayed with her, echoing in her mind long after the night had passed. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. No one had ever seen her as anything more than a royal figure, a duty to be fulfilled. But Ethan saw her as a person, and for the first time in her life, Zara felt free. Free from the constraints of her title, free from the weight of expectation. In that moment, Zara realized that the freedom she had longed for all these years had been right in front of her the entire time. It wasn't something she needed to earn or fight for. It was something she had simply been missing, someone to treat her as an equal, not as a queen. Ethan had given her that gift, and in doing so, he had changed everything. She could no longer see herself the way she once had, bound by the chains of her royal lineage. Zara was more than her title, and for the first time in her life, she was free to be herself. As the days passed, Zara found herself looking forward to the brief moments she shared with Ethan more than she ever expected. The palace, with all its opulence and grandeur, no longer felt as welcoming as it once had. The long corridors, the grand halls, the endless streams of courtiers and dignitaries, they all seemed distant, as though they belonged to someone else. Her life had always been dictated by the expectations of others. But now, there was Ethan, whose kindness and straightforward nature had pierced through the layers of her carefully constructed world. He treated her like a human being, not a title, not a royal. His company was a reminder that life didn't have to be a performance, that she didn't have to live for others' approval. The more she spent time with him, the more Zara realized how much she had been missing. She had been raised to be the perfect princess, to be poised and graceful at all times, to carry the weight of her people's hopes and dreams. But what about her own desires? What about her own need for genuine connection? These questions had never occurred to her until Ethan had started showing her a different way of living. One evening, they sat in the palace garden, the stars above them shining brightly, casting a soft glow. Over the landscape, Zara looked at Ethan, her thoughts swirling. She had always been the center of attention in the royal courts, but now, sitting with him, she felt like just another person. "Ethan," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why do you treat me like this?" Ethan looked at her with a calm expression, as if her question were the simplest thing in the world. "Like what?" he asked. "Like, I'm just a person, not a queen." Zara's eyes searched his face, trying to understand the reason behind his kindness. Ethan smiled, the kind of smile that reached his eyes and made them twinkle with warmth. "Because you are just a person, Zara. The title, the crown, all of that, it doesn't change who you really are." His words lingered in the air, settling in Zara's heart like a seed. For the first time in her life, she felt a sense of peace, as if a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. She had always lived with the pressure of being perfect, of living up to her royal lineage. But now, Ethan had shown her that she didn't have to carry that burden alone. In that quiet moment, Zara realized that freedom wasn't just about escaping from the expectations of her royal life. It was about the ability to just be, without the need for approval or validation. For the first time, she wasn't just Zara Valen, the princess of the Tan Dominion. She was Zara, a person, and she liked that person. Over the next few weeks, their connection deepened. They spent more time together, whether it was in the palace gardens, in the quiet of the royal library, or walking through the bustling streets of Earth cities. Zara began to open up, sharing her thoughts and feelings, things she had kept hidden for so long. Ethan listened, offering his perspective when asked, but never pushing her to open up more than she was comfortable with. Their bond was built on mutual respect, not duty or obligation. It was a connection that felt as natural as breathing. Zara felt lighter with every passing day. She no longer saw herself as a burden or as a symbol of power. With Ethan, she was just a person, someone worthy of love and care, not because of her title, but because of who she was. And slowly, Zara began to understand what true freedom felt like. It wasn't in the absence of her royal duties, but in the presence of someone who saw her for who she truly was. The day came when the Tan Dominion's political situation demanded Zara's return to her royal duties. Her mother, Queen Nisha, sent for her, and Zara knew the time had come to leave Earth and return to the palace. But this time, it was different. She wasn't afraid. She wasn't burdened by the thought of going back to the palace, to the life she had known. She knew that no matter where she went, no matter what her title demanded of her, she would always carry with her the sense of freedom she had found with Ethan. And for the first time, Zara felt like she could face the future on her own terms. As Zara made her way back to the Tan Dominion, she felt a strange sense of calm, something she had never expected. The grand palace that had once felt like a cage now seemed less imposing. She was returning not as a princess bound by her title, but as Zara, a person who had experienced something beyond the confines of her royal life. Ethan had given her that freedom, and though they were about to part ways, Zara felt more herself than she had in years. The flight back was long, And as the sleek ship made its way through the stars, Zara stared out of the window at the vastness of space. It was an endless expanse of possibility, and for the first time in her life, she felt like she had a place in it. She wasn't just the daughter of Queen Nisha, she was Zara, someone with her own dreams, her own desires. When the ship landed back on the grounds of the Crimson Palace, Zara felt a pang of sadness. She would have to return to the palace life, but she knew that the woman she was now was different. She had changed in ways that could never be undone. As she stepped off the ship, she was met by the familiar sight of the palace's towering spires, the polished marble steps, and the waiting guards. But this time, they didn't seem as intimidating. Her mother, Queen Nisha, was standing at the entrance, her regal presence undeniable. Zara approached, her steps steady but not weighed down by the usual pressure. "Zara," her mother said, her voice soft but commanding. "You've returned." Zara nodded, her heart beating with a mix of excitement and apprehension. "Yes, mother. I'm ready." Queen Nisha studied her for a moment, her piercing gaze scrutinizing every detail of her daughter. "You've changed," she remarked. "I can see it in your eyes." Zara swallowed, feeling the weight of her mother's words. "I have," she replied, her voice steady. "But I'm still your daughter." Queen Nisha gave a slight nod, her expression unreadable. "We will speak more later. There is much to discuss. Come inside." Zara followed her mother into the palace, but this time, the palace felt different. It wasn't her whole world anymore. It was just a place she had once been confined to, but now, it was simply a part of her life. That night, as the moon rose high above the palace, Zara sat in her chambers, thinking about everything that had led her to this moment. She remembered the conversations with Ethan, the way he had treated her like a person, not a princess. She remembered how he had made her feel seen and heard in ways no one had before. Her heart ached at the thought of leaving him behind, but she knew that he had given her a gift she could never repay. He had shown her what freedom felt like. She closed her eyes and imagined him, standing beside her, smiling that warm, easy smile. She missed him, but she also knew that her journey had just begun. She had learned that she didn't need a title to be valued. She didn't need to live up to anyone's expectations but her own. Zara Valen, the princess of the Tan Dominion, was still part of a larger world, but she was no longer defined by it. She was her own person now, free to explore what that meant. The next day, Zara found herself once again attending to the responsibilities of royalty, meeting with ambassadors, and discussing matters of state. But this time, she carried herself differently. There was no longer the pressure to be perfect, to fulfill every expectation. She wasn't just Zara Valen, the princess. She was Zara, a woman who had experienced something deeper, something real. She had discovered a part of herself that had always been there, but had been hidden under the weight of her royal duties. And though she would always be a part of the Tan Dominion, she would also be more than that. She was free to be herself. It was a quiet revolution, but it was hers. And as the days passed, Zara embraced her new life with a sense of purpose and peace that had eluded her for so long. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain. She would never again let her title define her. She was Zara, and that was enough. As Zara settled into her new role, a sense of peace began to settle over her. It was as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders, one that she had carried her whole life. The grandeur of the palace, the endless courtiers, the politicians, the dignitaries, they all seemed like distant echoes now. For the first time, she was not just a queen's daughter or a royal figurehead. She was Zara, and that was enough. But that didn't mean her life had become any less complex. She still had responsibilities, still had obligations to the Tan Dominion and her people. However, these responsibilities no longer felt like a burden. They felt like part of who she was, not something that defined her entire existence. The change within her was gradual but profound. At times, she caught herself smiling more often, laughing more freely. The moments spent with Ethan were still fresh in her memory, his easy confidence, his unwavering belief that she was worthy of being seen as more than her title. She found herself thinking of him often. It was as if he had unlocked something inside her, a part of herself she had long buried. She knew they couldn't be together, not with the distance between their worlds, not with the responsibilities she still had. But that didn't matter. What mattered was that he had shown her what it meant to be free, to be truly seen. Zara threw herself into her work, balancing the delicate diplomacy required of her position with the personal growth she had experienced. She made more of an effort to speak to people as equals, to listen more, to understand more. Her advisors noticed the change, but none of them dared to comment directly. They simply began to notice that Zara Valen was not just a princess anymore. She was a leader, one who understood the power of compassion and connection. Her reputation in the palace started to shift. Courtiers, once distant and stiff in her presence, now came to her with respect and admiration. There was no longer the subtle air of fear when they spoke to her, as if they had to carefully choose their words in the presence of royalty. Zara had become someone they could relate to, someone they could trust. As her life in the palace evolved, so did her understanding of what it meant to be truly free. It wasn't about running away or escaping her duties. It was about finding balance, about knowing that she was enough, just as she was. One evening, as she walked through the grand halls of the Crimson Palace, Zara paused to admire the intricate artwork that lined the walls. She had passed by it countless times, but today, it seemed different. Today, she saw the beauty in it, not just the obligation to appreciate it as part of her royal duties. Her footsteps echoed softly as she walked down the corridor, and for a moment, she stopped and closed her eyes. She thought of Ethan again, wondering where he was and what he was doing. She couldn't help but smile at the thought of him. He had taught her so much without even realizing it. She was no longer defined by her title, by her family's legacy. She was her own person, and that was something she would carry with her forever. As she opened her eyes, a soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. "Your Highness," came the voice of one of her attendants. "The council is waiting for you." Zara nodded, taking one last look at the artwork before turning to face the future. She was ready. For the first time, she felt ready to step into the world, not as Zara Valen, the princess, but as Zara, the person who had learned to be free. She walked into the council chamber with her head held high, her heart light, and a sense of calm confidence that would define her reign. The journey was far from over, but she knew she was no longer alone. Zara had found her path, and she would walk it with strength and grace, knowing that she was enough. As Zara continued to embrace her new perspective, the weight of her royal duties no longer felt like a burden. The days were long, filled with meetings and diplomatic discussions, but there was a newfound lightness in her approach. She no longer feared the future. Instead, she was determined to shape it on her own terms. Her actions had started to influence those around her. Courtiers, who once stood at a distance, now approached her with genuine respect, not out of obligation, but because they saw her as someone who truly understood what it meant to be a leader. Her leadership style was subtle, rooted in empathy and understanding rather than the rigid formalities that had governed the Tan Dominion for centuries. She knew her people, their struggles, their hopes, and she worked tirelessly to ensure their voices were heard. The once intimidating halls of the Crimson Palace now felt like a space of possibility, where every decision she made was for the betterment of her people, not just to fulfill an expectation. One evening, as she sat alone in her chambers, reviewing the latest reports from Earth, a soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Your Highness," came the voice of her assistant. "There is someone here to see you." Zara glanced up, her heart skipping a beat as she recognized the familiar voice. "Send them in," she said, her voice steady despite the flutter of emotions that rose within her. The door opened, and in walked Ethan. His presence filled the room, and for a moment, it was as if no time had passed. He looked just as she remembered, strong, confident, but with the same warmth in his eyes that had always made her feel at ease. "Ethan," Zara said, rising from her seat. "What are you doing here?" Ethan smiled, a hint of mischief in his eyes. "I came to see how the new queen was doing." Zara's heart swelled at his words. "I'm no longer just the queen, Ethan. I'm Zara." He nodded, understanding what she meant. "I know," he said softly, "and that's exactly why I came." For a moment, they simply stood there, the years of separation between them melting away in the quiet space. "I've thought about you every day," Zara admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "And I've thought about you too," Ethan replied. "But you've come so far, Zara. You're not the person you were when I first met. You've found your strength." Zara smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her. "It's because of you," she said, her voice full of gratitude. You showed me what freedom really means. I'll never forget that. Ethan stepped closer, his gaze never leaving hers. You're stronger than you think, Zara. You've always had it in you. I just helped you see it. The silence that followed was filled with a quiet understanding, a bond that transcended time and distance. Zara felt something stir within her, something she hadn't felt in a long time. It was a sense of belonging, a sense of peace. I still have a lot of work to do, Zara said, her voice steady as she looked toward the future. But I'm not doing it alone anymore. Ethan smiled, his eyes filled with pride. You never were, he said. The two of them stood there for a while, simply being in each other's presence. Zara knew that, no matter where their paths took them, they would always carry a part of each other with them. And that, she realized, was more than enough. She wasn't just Zara Valen, the princess of the Tan Dominion. She was Zara, a woman who had learned to live freely, to lead with compassion, and to embrace the future with hope. And with that realization, she knew that whatever came next, she was ready. Zara stood with Ethan on the balcony, overlooking the glowing skyline of the Tan Dominion's capital, the soft hum of evening energy fields drifting through the air like a quiet breath. The city stretched endlessly, a testament to her people's power and legacy. Yet tonight it felt smaller, almost intimate, as if the world had shrunk to the quiet space between them. Everything about Ethan's unexpected arrival had stirred something deep within her, something she could not ignore. She had grown confident in her new role, but his presence reminded her of the moments that had shaped her transformation. Ethan leaned against the balcony rail, his expression calm but thoughtful as he surveyed the city lights. It is different seeing it in person, he admitted. Earth has cities, but nothing quite like this. Zara watched him, noting the way his eyes reflected the warm glow of the horizon. I always thought this place was a symbol of everything I had to be, she said quietly. But now I see. It is just one part of who I am. He turned to her with a small smile. You sound like someone who knows herself now. Zara exhaled slowly, the cool night air brushing her skin as she nodded. I think I do, she said. But knowing myself does not mean I know what comes next. Ethan shifted, his voice gentle. You do not have to know everything right now. No one expects that. Zara looked down, her voice barely a whisper. My people expect certainty. My council expects tradition. My mother expects a future shaped by the past. And yet, the more I step into who I am, the more those expectations feel like walls I do not want to rebuild. Ethan let her words settle before replying. Then do not rebuild them, he said simply. You have already changed so much. Maybe your people need something different now. Zara felt her heart tighten at the quiet truth in his words. She had been navigating the delicate balance between tradition and progress, but Ethan made the path sound clearer than she allowed herself to believe. Sometimes I wonder, she said softly, if my desire for change is selfish. Ethan shook his head. Caring about your people and caring about yourself are not opposites, Zara. You can be both a leader and a person. You just have to let yourself be. His words warmed her in a way no ceremony or diplomatic success ever had. She stepped closer, her voice steady. I want to lead with honesty, not fear. With compassion, not expectation. But that means redefining everything my title has ever meant. Then redefine it, Ethan replied. You already started the moment you chose to see yourself beyond it. A gentle silence wrapped around them. Zara felt the truth settle in her heart like a steady flame. She was no longer the fragile princess searching for permission to exist beyond her crown. She was Zara, a woman learning to lead through freedom, not duty. She looked at Ethan, her voice filled with quiet conviction. Thank you for reminding me who I want to be. He smiled, warm and unwavering. You reminded yourself. I just happened to be here to witness it. And in the soft glow of the city lights, Zara felt the path ahead begin to unfold. Uncertain, imperfect, but wholly hers. As the days unfolded, Zara found herself becoming more attuned to the needs of her people. The palace that had once seemed like a gilded cage now felt like the starting point of a new chapter, one where she could lead with both compassion and clarity. The conversations with Ethan continued to resonate in her mind, reminding her daily that leadership was not about power, but about making choices that aligned with who she was as a person. Her council had noticed the subtle shift in her demeanor. They had once seen her as a figurehead, a princess with a crown of responsibility. Now, they were beginning to see her as a true leader, one who was willing to make tough decisions based on empathy and understanding. It wasn't easy, of course. The pressures of the royal court were constant, and the expectations were unrelenting. Zara was expected to balance diplomacy, tradition, and the weight of her family's legacy. Yet, for the first time, she felt confident in her ability to do so without losing herself in the process. One morning, Zara stood before the palace's grand windows, gazing out over the city as the sun began to rise. The vastness of the Tan was humbling, but also inspiring. She knew that the path ahead wouldn't be simple. There would be moments of doubt, moments where she would have to make difficult choices. But she no longer feared those moments. She had learned that her strength came from within, not from the title she bore or the legacy of her ancestors. It came from her ability to embrace her humanity, to listen to her heart, and to lead with authenticity. As she turned away from the window, she heard a soft knock on the door. "Your Highness," came the voice of her assistant. "There's someone here to see you." Zara smiled softly. She had a feeling she knew who it was. "Send them in," she replied, her voice calm and steady. The door opened, and Ethan walked in, his presence as comforting as it had been the first time they met. He no longer seemed like an outsider to her, but someone who had become an integral part of her journey. "Ethan," Zara greeted him warmly, her eyes meeting his. "What brings you here today?" Ethan smiled, a look of quiet admiration in his eyes. "I just wanted to see how you're doing," he said. "You've made a lot of changes, Zara. I can tell you're on the right path." Zara felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. "It's not always easy," she admitted. "There are days when the weight of it all feels overwhelming. But I know I'm doing what's right. I know that, for the first time, I'm leading with my heart." Ethan nodded, his expression softening. "And that's what will make you a great leader," he said quietly. "You're not just ruling from a throne. You're leading from within. That's what people will respect most." Zara smiled, grateful for his words. She had always feared that she wouldn't live up to the expectations placed upon her. But now, she realized that the only expectation she needed to meet was her own. As the days passed, Zara continued to shape her future with quiet determination. The challenges were far from over, but she knew that she had the strength to face them head-on. And through it all, she carried with her the knowledge that true leadership was about more than just making decisions. It was about being true to herself, about connecting with those she led, and about finding freedom in the choices she made. With Ethan by her side, and her heart aligned with her purpose, Zara was ready for whatever the future held. No longer bound by the expectations of her title, she was free to lead in the way that felt most authentic to her. As Zara continued her journey as the ruler of the Tan, the challenges she faced were not just political, but deeply personal. The weight of her decisions now carried the lives of her people, and for the first time, she truly felt the responsibility of leadership. But the certainty that once eluded her had found its place within her, as she knew that to lead well, she had to remain true to who she was. One morning, Zara stood before the grand mirror in her chambers, her reflection staring back at her. She had changed in so many ways, but this woman she saw now was no longer confined by the title she was born into. She was someone who had learned to balance compassion with strength, someone who had learned that to lead was to be authentic. The sound of a soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. "Your Highness, the council is waiting for you," came the voice of her assistant. Zara took one last look at herself in the mirror and nodded. It was time to face the day, to continue the work she had started. As she made her way down the long corridors of the palace, her heart felt light. She had been dreading these moments before, the formalities, the endless requests, the feeling of being trapped in her royal role. But now it was different. She no longer felt like a puppet on strings. Every step she took was hers to make. The council meeting was as expected, a room filled with advisors, each of them eager to present their ideas and opinions. Yet, this time, Zara did not simply listen to the recommendations of her advisors. She engaged with them, challenged them, and made her own voice heard. She was no longer just the princess or the ruler. She was a leader, one who saw the value in every perspective and knew that her decisions would shape the future of her people. "Your Highness, we must consider the political ramifications of your plan," one of her council members, a seasoned diplomat, said. Zara nodded thoughtfully. I understand the risks, she replied. But we cannot continue to operate as we have. We must evolve, not just for our people, but for the future of the Dominion. Her words were met with silence for a moment, the room heavy with the weight of what she had said. Zara could feel the eyes of her council on her, weighing her words, evaluating her decisions. But instead of feeling the pressure, she felt a calm assurance. She was ready to make the hard choices, to lead with a clear vision and a steady hand. Later that evening, Zara stood alone in the palace gardens, the moon casting a soft glow on the flowers around her. She had always found peace in this place, the quiet solitude that allowed her to reflect. As she walked among the blooms, she thought of Ethan, of how his presence had made her see the world in a new light. He had helped her realize that leadership was not about titles or power. It was about the people you served and the choices you made for them. The path she had chosen wasn't easy, and there would be times when the weight of it all would feel overwhelming. But she knew that she was not alone in her journey. The foundation she had built, grounded in honesty and authenticity, would carry her forward. As the stars twinkled above her, Zara realized that the future was uncertain, but for the first time, she was ready to face it with open arms. She had found her voice, her purpose, and now she could lead with the confidence that came from knowing who she truly was. Her title was no longer just a symbol. It was a reflection of her strength, her compassion, and her determination to make the Tan Dominion a place where freedom and equality would thrive. She was Zara, and she was ready to embrace whatever the future held. The weeks that followed were filled with moments of growth and learning for Zara. As the leader of the Tan Dominion, she continued to navigate the complexities of her role, but with a deeper sense of purpose than ever before. Her decisions were no longer made out of obligation, but from a place of authenticity and connection. She had learned to trust herself, to follow the instincts that had guided her through so much already. Zara knew that the future was not guaranteed, but she also knew that the path she was on was hers to shape. One evening, she found herself standing at the edge of the palace grounds, looking out over the vast city below. The stars above seemed to offer a quiet reassurance, as if they, too, understood the weight of her choices. She had come so far, yet the journey ahead still held so many unknowns. But Zara no longer feared the unknown. In fact, it had become a part of her life, an inevitable element that she had learned to embrace. You look deep in thought. A familiar voice interrupted her reverie. Zara turned to see Ethan walking towards her, his steady presence as comforting as it had always been. I was just thinking about everything that's happened, Zara said, her voice soft. How much has changed? How much I've changed. Ethan stopped beside her, his gaze following hers as he looked out over the city. You've come a long way, he said quietly. And you've done it with grace, Zara. You've embraced your role, but never lost yourself in it. Zara smiled, grateful for his words. I couldn't have done it without your support, she replied. You helped me see that leadership is about more than titles. It's about being true to who you are. Ethan nodded, his eyes thoughtful. And you've proven that. But the journey doesn't end here. There's still more to do, more to learn. Zara took a deep breath, the cool night air filling her lungs. I know, she said, but I'm ready for whatever comes next. I'm not the same person I was when I first became queen. I've found my strength, my voice. And now, I can lead with purpose. As they stood there together, Zara felt a sense of peace settle over her. She knew that the road ahead would not be easy, but she was no longer afraid. With Ethan by her side, and the strength she had found within herself, she felt ready to face whatever challenges the future held. The Tan Dominion had changed, and so had she. She was no longer defined by her title, her bloodline, or the expectations of others. She was Zara, a leader who had chosen to lead with heart and conviction, and that made all the difference. With the city lights twinkling beneath them, Zara knew that she had come into her own. The weight of her crown no longer felt heavy, for it was now a symbol of her journey, of her transformation. She was ready for the next chapter, knowing that the greatest strength she possessed was the ability to remain true to herself.